How in the world did doubting Thomas ever become an apostle? You would think that Jesus would be smarter than inviting a Thomas onto the team, because you know how they are. They're unreliable, they're doubters, they're losers. I mean, would you trust a Thomas to take care of any of your stuff? Or would you want one as a friend, or in your family, or in your church, or on your vestry, or as your priest? All over the world today, guys named Thomas are hanging their heads in shame because of the gospel lesson. And it's especially tough in the Messiah family because you cannot throw a brick around here without hitting a Tom. We've got Buckner, Hubner, Johnston, Knappman, Laraquente, Lyons, Stokowski, Werble, not to mention Rutherford. We've had several Toms even move away because of the embarrassment. They didn't want to be here for this. Tom and Tommy Jackson are in North Carolina right now watching us online. You can run, but you can't hide. Oh, the humanity. Doubting Thomas. It's a really funny name, unless it's yours. It's better than Peeping Tom, but not much. And it's simply not accurate. It's never accurate to label people, especially Easter people, based on one incident in their life. Because when we do that, we always pick one of not their best moments, don't we? Somebody does something stupid or makes a mistake or has an accident, and for the rest of their life, people giggle about that one embarrassing moment. When I was in 8th grade, I liked a girl who was gorgeous, smart, artistic, in the honors class, and the co-star of our 8th grade musical play. And when I told my best friend that I liked her, he cracked up and said, she wet her pants at school when she was in the 2nd grade. And all the guys who were standing around snickered and nodded. Even in high school, if you brought up her name, that's what people remembered. Now, as far as we know, doubting Thomas never wet his pants in public. But this episode that we remember about him is almost as bad. And why would we remember only this one and not any of the others? You say, what? You mean Thomas did something other than doubt? Yes, he did lots of stuff, and it's all in the Gospel of John. When Lazarus dies, Jesus sets out to go raise him from the dead. Public opinion has started to turn against Jesus. The Jewish leaders want to kill him, and the disciples know if Jesus has a target on him, they do too. And 11 of the disciples try to talk Jesus out of going back to Jerusalem. Thomas alone steps up and says, "No, let's go with him that we might die with him." Now, does that sound like a doubting Thomas to you? No, not at all. I mean, why don't we think about that episode when we think of Thomas and call him maybe Courageous Thomas? At the Last Supper, Jesus is talking to the guys about heaven, and they aren't getting it at all. And he says what we hear at almost every funeral. In my Father's house there are many mansions, and if I go to prepare a place for you, and you know the way that I'm going. And Thomas doesn't. So he raises his hand and says, wait a minute. We don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? And Jesus' answer echoes through time. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, asking a question is not doubt. Questions are how we learn, how we come to understand, especially stuff that we think that everybody else already knows. And that's how it looked around the table. Jesus is explaining what's going on, and all the disciples are nodding, and they have their brows furrowed, and they're harump, like they really understand what's going on. And Thomas doesn't, and he's the only one who's willing to look stupid in front of his friends and ask the question, asking the question that all of the rest of them were dying to hear the answer to. When we think of Thomas, why don't we think of that event and call him Inquisitive Thomas? And then there's that doubting stuff that we just heard. But if you look at the whole story, Tom does not ask for anything beyond what everybody else saw. You heard it today. On first Easter day, Jesus shows up in a locked room, says, "Peace be with you," because all the disciples are freaking out to see a guy that they think is a ghost. And the first thing that Jesus does is he holds out his hands and shows them his side. And the Bible says, and then the disciples believed. Well, Thomas wasn't there that day. So they go find him. They tell him the good news, and he replies, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hand, put my hand in his side, I'm not going to believe it." But before we dog Thomas too much, let's remember, all he asks is to see what everybody else did. Wouldn't you? On that first Easter day, would you have believed that Jesus was alive again if you hadn't seen it? Why not call him Honest Thomas? Willing to state the extent of his faith and its limits, not willing to fake it till he makes it. But even though Thomas doesn't believe his friends, he's willing to be convinced, which is why he's there with them on the next Sunday. Now, if you ever wonder what church the disciples might go to if they were still around, Thomas would not be an Episcopalian. Now, we know that because he missed church on Easter, but he was there the Sunday after. If he were really doubting Thomas, he wouldn't have been there that next Sunday or ever again. But he is there because he's willing to be wrong. He's willing to be shown the truth. He's willing to consider the possibility that Jesus just might really be alive. That takes humility. To admit, I might not know as much as I think I do. I might be wrong. You might be right. I think we should call him Humble Thomas. Yeah, Humble Thomas. I mean, all the Thomases I know are just like that. Yeah, exactly. But there's more than just humility here. In the face of the incredible claim that they've seen a dead man alive, Thomas is willing to give Jesus a chance to show himself. And that is an amazing step of faith. See, the difference between faith and non-faith is not whether we feel like we believe it or not. It's whether we're willing to give it a try or not. You see, faith gives God the chance to show us whether or not he's real. Faith is willing to do an Easter experiment to see if it works, even if it seems to be unreasonable, and faith is often unreasonable. Giving God 10% of our income is unreasonable. If I'm having a hard time getting by on 100% of my income, how could I possibly get by on 90%? But if in faith we try it, we find that it works. Prayer is unreasonable. I mean, why would we think that talking to God would make any kind of difference in the world? But if in faith we try it, we find that it works. Putting other people first is unreasonable because there's barely enough for myself. And if I share what I have and I put you first, there may not be enough for me. But I find if in faith I try it, it works. Each of those actions is unreasonable, but each of them is faith because it gives God a chance to do more than I can do for myself. It's faith because faith is not just belief, it's action based on what I believe. Thomas acted upon a single shred of belief that he had, and that's faith. And when we act, even though we aren't sure, even though it looks like a long shot, even though everything inside of us says that can't possibly work, that's faith. And that's when we get to see God move and do exceedingly abundantly above what we can ask or imagine. Thomas acted upon what he hoped might be possibly true. That is faith. So why don't we call him Faithful Thomas? And his faith paid off. The next Sunday, Thomas is there. Jesus shows up again, alive, and immediately shows Thomas his hand and his side, and Thomas says, "My Lord and my God." Now, up to this point, lots of folks have realize that Jesus is more than just a man or more than just a prophet, and some are even willing to call him Messiah. But Thomas is the first to recognize he's not just the Son of God, he is God. God in the flesh, God incarnate. Why not call him insightful Thomas? Now, history brands him as doubting Thomas based on one isolated episode in his life. But was he not also courageous Thomas, inquisitive Thomas, honest Thomas, humble, faithful, and insightful Thomas? Any of those other names would be equally accurate because he was each of those. However, each one of those would be equally inaccurate because he was none of them all the time. No one is so simple that one incident or habit or character trait, whether good or bad, defines them. And it's wrong to label people, especially Easter people, based on one or two episodes in their life. Whom have you named? Is there somebody in your life that you've branded or judged because of one or two actions or mistakes in their life? And I'm not talking about repeated long-time behavior, but somebody who messed up or mistreated you once or twice, and you named them something unkind because of that. It's time to forgive that person and give them another chance. Jesus does. And that name that you call them, it's time to give them a new one. Because if we're honest, we're all doubting Thomases. Our faith fluctuates. We have heroic moments and shameful ones. We have good days and bad days. We all make mistakes. We all have accidents. We've all said and done things that we wish we hadn't. We wouldn't want someone to name us or define us by one of our less than best moments, would we? So let's not do that to anyone else. And what do you call yourself? You see, if we're not going to do that to someone else, let's not do it to ourselves either. If isolated events and accidents are no reason to beat up somebody else, it's no reason to beat up ourselves either. What do you call yourself? See, if your life is stained by an accident or a mistake or a poor choice or a stupid remark or a selfish act, if you call yourself something like Doubting Thomas, Jesus can remove your stain and change your name today. You've already done the most important part. Like Thomas, you showed up. You're here. Jesus forgave Thomas, and Jesus will forgive you. And if Jesus forgives you, how can you not forgive yourself? Sometimes the hardest person in the world to forgive is the one looking back at us from the mirror. But wouldn't it feel good to shed those names that we call ourselves because of our past? Stupid, loser, idiot, dummy, ugly, selfish, unfaithful, incompetent, unworthy, dirty, disgusting. You fill in the blank. Instead of one of those, what if we substitute one from a better moment in our life and become like the real Thomas? Courageous, inquisitive, honest, humble, faithful, insightful, or generous, kind, talented, loving, caring. You fill in the blank. If any of us walked in here today with a name that we hate because of an episode in our past, we can walk out of here with a new name as Easter people who, with courageous, inquisitive, honest, humble, faithful, insightful Thomas, realize that Jesus is alive. And we can say to him what Thomas did, "My Lord and my God."